Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Davis, and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my friends and my sponsor, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative projects can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. They have
Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print.
I
I
don't know
know
what
printing
that
your creative
is
projects can be
doing.
confusing
Oh
and
snap!
stressful,
This
but
is not
Mixum
good.
is here to make.
Wow, that was not intended right there.
Oh
Apparently,
well.
I did not pause my YouTube and it popped up, so that scared the living shit out of me. So, having said that, and continuing my sponsor read here, they have an amazing quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes for free. And they have 24-hour customer service and Mixing is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many people's Kickstarters that I've interviewed, so that you've heard about. And obviously, they have services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. And Mixing can print anywhere to reach your audience in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to mixup.com, and right now listeners of my show can get a 5% discount by dropping my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab to get 5% off, as I stated, and that is mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab, 5% off on your very first order. And without further ado, and nearly giving myself a heart attack, Anakin Murphy. So welcome to the show, man.
Hello.
Yeah, no, I am super, super excited to have you on because obviously you're killing it right now in wrestling. And we're going to be talking about 5 promotions for the most part, but I am curious before we get into them, how did you get into wrestling? Because you are still very new to it.
Uh, Originally, whenever I was starting to become a fan, my dad got me into it whenever I was 9, and from there it's just kind of been my life. Um, I started training whenever I was 16 at Cowboy Bob Orton's school in pretty much East St. Louis. That's really how I got my start in wrestling.
And so, obviously, how did you even go find that wrestling school? Because it is tricky to find the right wrestling school. And then, what was your training even like at that school? Because I know that you bounced around a little bit also to a few other schools.
Uh, I found that just on Facebook. Um, from there, I went to Michael Elgin School for a little bit, and from there, I went to Guy Smith's Pinfall Academy. I think the main person I really credit for my training is Roy Lewis, because he was the guy that was there for all three. And if there was anybody I learned the most from, it was from Roy.
And so, obviously, let's talk a little bit about Roy because I know Roy, I think, was one of your first matches. And what was that like? Because obviously, he's training you and he's, teaching you a bunch of stuff. And then, sort of, one of your first matches when you first
My
started out.
first match with Roy was terrible. It was bad, and but it happened. I moved past it. Roy is one of my best friends, and we eventually made that match happen again, but a lot better. Whenever I was a lot better, and it was a grand time.
And so, to even talk about that a little bit, because what is that like? Because obviously, your first match is always nerve wracking. You're coming out, and I know that technically you had some wrestling experience before that because you were reffing some matches. I know, and you were also part of ring crew before you really stepped into a ring. I think, but even coming into that, and then that first match being really rough, and then eventually using it almost as a learning experience, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
And so what was that like? Because it obviously probably opened up a bunch of eyes and a bunch of different things in your world to wrestling, and also sort of set a standard of what a bad match is. I don't know if it caused pain for you.
It didn't really cause pain for me. It was kind of like one of those things like, all right, that happened. I'm just going to pick myself up and move on. Um, I I went to training more frequently and I got better. And then whenever I came back to wrestling after a month or so, it just got a lot better for me.
No. I completely get that. And so obviously I was just super curious about really just
Yeah.
entering the wrestling world and all that stuff because where you really started to shine, and we're going to be jumping a little bit ahead, but I do want to talk about 01 USA because
Hmm.
that's sort of, I think, what really started the turning point. And you had all these matches, and obviously Johnny Kincaid was a good match. You know, Jackie's, or I'm probably getting his name wrong.
Big
So
Shock.
yeah. And I think you've had several matches with him. And so, what was this like in really getting into 01 and USA and having these early matches? Because, like, the crowd was really behind you and you were really hot when you first came into this promotion.
01 always was considered a home for me. I love that promotion. It's really the promotion that put a lot of confidence in me. Um, I went from just kind of doing some pre-show stuff, eventually into becoming a tag team with Walker Hayes and Self Destruct, running a tag team thing there. Uh, the next time I'll be there is September 18th against Victor Analog, and I'm really excited about that. So 01 has been like, I don't think I've really had that much of a negative experience at 01.
And one of the matches that stands out is your Kenny Alfonso match. And so, what was that like? Because obviously, Kenny Alfonso is very good at what he does, and he's been around for a little bit longer than you have. And so, what was it like getting to face him? And this is sort of the first shifting point, I think, in your career, because obviously you were going up against Dan Liplock in some fun matches. Obviously, Tanner Keeler, and I might be getting some of these names wrong. And then, obviously, the two names that I mentioned before, but this was really saying, oh snap, like you're sort of coming into your own in a lot of ways.
I
And
think that match was the match that turned people's heads. I love that match, and Kenny and I just kind of went in there and roughed each other up, and it was cool.
then obviously, what is that like for you? Because it's obviously validation to some degree, and so there's always a moment in everybody's wrestling career, from my experience of speaking to people, that there's validation, and when the crowd says, "Oh, this kid can hang," and especially when you're young, I think it's very important to reach that point because obviously I watched a bunch of your matches. I came in watching you from New Wave Pro, so I went backwards, not forwards. And I'm like, oh snap! When I'm watching these matches, and then you see that match, and you're watching on IWTV, there's a difference in the crowd before those matches, and then after with you. And so, what was that like being there, and even just seeing that real change? Because obviously, when we talk about self destruct in a second here, obviously, I think that respect was almost built into self destruct.
Mm-hmm. Things with me, it's really weird. Things don't really hit me like like that. Things are happening until like way later. Um, I feel like right now I have a pretty okay following, and I do feel kind of validated in some points in wrestling. But like again, like just some things haven't really hit me as hard, so it's kind of hard to answer that at the moment.
No. I get it. You're still very new, and even going further into 01, obviously self destruct is a very cool team. Where obviously, how did that even come about? Because it's you and Walker Hayes, and you guys have had all these crazy matches. You faced the Premier, and you faced DC Black, and obviously you also faced the Evil Empire, and then you've had a match with the besties in the world, and obviously that's Davey Vega and Matt Fitchett. So what was this like? Because obviously this is a big deal, and getting to go up against a team like the besties in the world, what was that like?
Uh, Bessie's really cool. Me and Walker were just kind of paired up together, and we had a lot of chemistry together, and we kind of just ran with it. I think I'm pretty fond with all the times we beat up Campbell and Bishop. That was cool. Uh, yeah, it's just like Self Destruct was a really fun time.
And then obviously, you guys in 01, you're going to be facing somebody, coming up soon in 01. And so what is that like to return to 01? And always, as you stated, it's almost very much like a home promotion for you because they took a real big risk on you and sort of took, and gave you prime spots to some degree to really hone your skills. And so what's that match coming up, and what is that like? Obviously, because the COVID era has been crazy.
It's me versus Victor Analog, the guy who just lost the 0-1 USA Junior Heavyweight title. So going in there and beating him is gonna get me up in the rankings for that Junior Heavyweight Championship. So that's kind of the goal heading into it.
And so there's a lot of stuff going on with that. But now I really want to get into the fun stuff that I think it has really even made your career more in the Midwest, and that's Anna Fight Underground. Because this is where you've embraced the violence, if you will, and there's no hope for us, is there?
I guess not.
And so one of the coolest matches, and I thoroughly enjoyed this match, was it was a no disqualification fans bring the weapons match, and that was against Satu Jin. And Satu Jin is a beast of a man, and he's been doing this forever, and he's very familiar with weapons, and not to mention that now fans are bringing the weapons. So how did this match come about? What was it like to be involved in a match like this, and even just adjusting and going up against Satu Jin?
Well, we didn't use any weapons. We went in there and wrestled, and it was a good time. Anna Fight Underground's another promotion that really took a chance on me. They booked me against Gary J in February, and that is still like the best match I ever had. Wrestling Satu was really cool. He's just a big guy. I'm a small guy, so I guess we had a good time just roughing each other up.
Yeah, and so obviously, what is it like to be in the ring with a veteran? Because obviously you're new, and there's a saying where a veteran's sort of going to help you, but it's also putting trust in you and being able to put on a good match and picking up stuff from that veteran. And Satu is in that category. So what was that like that you were paired, obviously not just from a small guy, big guy perspective, but also from a newcomer with a veteran that really, made the match work in a lot of ways?
I guess we just went in there and wrestled, and like fans liked it. I beat Satu, so
Did you think that sort of also changed fans' perspectives because you were getting validated in a lot of ways, and that it's now that you could hang? It's that entire concept where it's kind of like you beat the veteran and you beat the guy who's been doing this forever. People start saying, "Oh, okay, now we're starting to see how good this kid is and how good you are as a wrestler."
I mean, I don't really seek validation from anybody. I kind of just like keep on going. Like whatever happens, happens. Is really my mentality. If I got validated, like that's cool. If not, that's cool too.
Yeah, but now, fair enough, fair enough. So obviously, though, you mentioned Gary J, and this is a match, and Gary J is one of those guys that's been around forever, has been wrestling, has been doing, the death match stuff and the hard hitting stuff, and has done everything. And so, what was this like? Really getting paired up with Gary J, going to war with Gary J? There is no safe Gary J match. Everything is chaotic with Gary J in the ring. He chops the hardest. And obviously, it is very cool when people get a Gary J match because not everybody gets a Gary J match in the Midwest. And so, what was that like for you coming into this and them trusting you to book him, book you two together, and just getting the ability to wrestle Gary because it is a privilege in a lot of ways?
It was a privilege. I really loved that match. It was very physical, very intense, but at the end, you know, I got up and I survived, and I gained Gary's respect after that, and just moved on from there.
And so I mean I love this match, and I think I know that in a lot of ways it's very cool to have that match. And then obviously I do want to jump into IW Mid South because that's another one of those like legendary promotions that's out there, especially in the Midwest. I mean, everybody knows IW Mid South. I know Anna Underground Fight is sort of a new promotion. And so what was it like to come into IW Mid South? Because that promotion's been around forever. Obviously, Ian Rodden runs that thing, and it's very old school ECW vibe to it in a lot of ways. And so how'd you get into that promotion?
I IWA Mid-South, I went to their tryout show, and I guess did good and got some dates from it. And yeah, that's really it. Like IWA Mid-South is a it's a good place, and I enjoyed my matches there.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the cool things and one of the matches that I thoroughly liked was that you were involved in a ladder match. And I don't know if this was your first ladder match, but what was this like being in a ladder match? And a lot of people were in this ladder match, and I think it was Fight for Your Spot ladder match. And I know that I think Unforeseen Perez was in there, Billy Tipton was in there, Corey Stone was in there, obviously Cole Carter was in there, Crash Jackson was in there. And what was that like being in a ladder match? Because those are always fun to watch, and I'm a huge ladder match guy. And I think what was this your first ladder match? And even how do you like mentally prepare for that?
It was my first ladder match. It was definitely crazy. Um, yeah, it was just a crazy ladder match.
Yeah, and obviously, you've done some other cool things. Obviously, I think you had another match with Satu Jin in IW Mid South. I also think that you had a match against Jack Griffin and Matt Diesel. And so, what was this like? Because obviously now you're gaining more experience and having another match with a guy like Satu Jin with a little more experience. What was that like for you, doing that and doing it in a different promotion, and obviously having more experience to bring more of a fight in, and getting to wrestle him again and sort of show what you can do.
Well, after that match, me and Satu were 1-1. I won at Anna, he won at Mid South. It'd be really cool to have a tiebreaker with Satu because I enjoyed the match at Mid South as well. And yeah.
And then obviously I want to jump away from Mid South, and I do want to talk about New Wave Pro because I like New Wave Pro, and obviously Don't Die Miles was just on Sunday, and I know you and him sort of had a match, but before we get into that, how did you come into New Wave Pro? Because New Wave Pro is a relatively new company, and they're doing things in a very different way than other companies are doing. And I think they've adjusted very much to the COVID era. They've obviously run a bunch of shows, and they've run as much as humanly possible. So how did you come into them? Because they are very much, I feel like, filling a void in the Midwest and what they're doing and who they're bringing in, and sort of giving, homegrown talent, opportunity, and talent in the Midwest territory, priority versus bringing in talent for the most part outside of the Midwest region.
New Wave reached out to me and booked me, and ever since then I've had a lot of fun with New Wave. It's a really, really strong promotion with a lot of strong things coming up.
And obviously, I mean, just to speak of the strength of New Wave. So obviously, I mentioned Miles and Don't Die Miles, and one of your first matches in New Wave was for the NWP Crossroads title. And so obviously, what was this like coming into this company, challenging him, and really going against Miles, who at the time was really popular, really liked, and it's a crazy match because you're both similar in certain aspects, and you're very different in others. And it was a very cool dynamic. And even just the company, booking you, and right off the bat, you're thrown into their title picture.
It was a cool thing. I'm gonna walk to my car and charge up my phone, but
Go right ahead.
it was a good match. It was unlike any other Don't Die Miles match because this match was a fight. We went in there and we just beat the shit out of each other, and it was fun. Being for the Crossroads title on my first match there showed that I guess I can go. And ever since then, I've been put in some really, really fun matches.
So to even talk about this, because one of the things in my world, and I'm obviously a fan, I'm not a wrestler, so I might be speaking slightly out of turn, but I feel like all these, with wrestling, there is this lack of a big fight feel being presented in wrestling. And this match in particular between you and Miles was very much a fight feel. And it felt like there was a story, it felt like there was real stakes on the line. And I'm curious how you feel about that, because that's how I'm viewing a lot of wrestling right now. When we look at, the big two, that's a problem for me, where there's almost no investment of stake and real commitment in that two people are vying for something, even with titles. Like, I feel like that there's nothing there, and I'm curious because that when I watched this match, that's how it felt in a lot of ways. Is that you want this title, he wants to defend the title, and this is a war. It's not, where we're not wrestling anymore.
To me, I think that's how I'm trying to have the feel for all my matches, because I feel like that's lost in wrestling, having things be more of a fight than a match. And I'm trying to bring that back.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that's very important, because I think, and that's something that I get out of you, is that you're not there to be entertaining. You're there to win matches and to accomplish a goal. And I think that that's something that's missing in wrestling. That has to, be like personal. Like, there has to be something there, and it has to be meaningful. And I think New Wave does that really, really, really well. And I think that's something that's extremely important. Just to talk about, two other matches. Obviously, you had, a match against Orin Creed and Devontae Knox and Nick King, as well as Orin Creed, uh, singly, I think, and you have a lot of history with Orin Creed, and obviously those matches with him are also very much that vibe where there's real stake. Whether you guys are fighting for just personal things and personal bragging rights, or for a title, or obviously somebody insulted somebody, for lack of a better word here. Obviously there's real positioning here. So, what was that like facing him? Because there's real history between the two of you.
Orion Creed's really, really good. He is probably one of the most underrated wrestlers in this entire region. Um, Wrestling him was fun, and just like all the others, we went in there and we roughed each other up, and it was a good time.
And I enjoyed this one. And then also talking about this is that Nate Matthews is another one that we got to talk about, because that was the NPW Ultra Rapid title. And Nate Matthews is one of those guys that's just underrated tremendously. And I think he came into wrestling a little bit late, but he is slaying it, and even going up against him, because obviously that's another one that really pushed you in a lot of ways. And it was a phenomenal match.
Yeah, I like that match. Unfortunately, he got the better of me and retained the title, but in that match, you can see that I brought the fight right back to Nate.
Yeah, and then obviously this was far from over between the two of you, because obviously you had a five-way elimination match that included a few other people. I think Victor Analog you were facing at Fatal Pro. Obviously Jay Marston was in there. I think Shane Botchler was in there as well. And so, what was that match like? 'Cause that's a crazy match.
That kicked off Mob Rules, and it set the tone for a really crazy show, because that match was crazy, and we went in there and we all had the goal to win the Ultra Rapid title, and it just went the way it did.
And so let's even talk about that, because something about wrestling that's super interesting, and I've spoken to a lot of people, and kicking off a show the right way matters, setting the pace for a show matters, also understanding where you are in a card matters. And so, what was this like really kicking off really hot? Because obviously I saw Mob Rule, a few days ago, because it was, I guess, taped, and then it was released pretty quickly. And so, what was this like really making the standard for every other match after you to be at this level? Because it is important when shows kick off the right way, and the pacing on a wrestling show matters. And that, obviously that's something I think is important. So, what was that like? Because this match sets the tone for everything else. And so, every other match has to be better than this match, and has to be hyped up better than this match in a lot of ways, which is a good thing, because this match was phenomenal.
Yeah, I do think the opener is the best match to be on a card for a wrestler, or at least for me it is. Whenever I'm opener, there's a lot of pressure to be good. But usually I think I do a pretty okay job.
Yeah, no, I just think it was perfect, and I think Mob Rule was very important because I think Mob Rule solidified New Wave Pro in a lot of ways, and all the matches that were on in Mob Rule were amazing. And then obviously, as I also was stating, is that I mean, Mob Rule got me interested. Obviously, Aaron Williams was at that, Gary J was at that, and I think a lot of people started really paying attention because certain people were wrestling. You know, you had JTG, Aaron Williams, and Gary at that, Mob Rule match show, I should say. And what was going on for me is that it was very much a driving point because I started seeing the name drops from New Wave Pro. And I started saying, oh man, what's Mob Rule? And then I'm like, oh wow, this is great. And then you see the opening match and you see, Don't Die Miles and everybody who was on there. And it's a really cool promotion that sort of popped out of nowhere in a lot of ways. I think that's something that's very important to understand, that I think Mob Rule really captured a lot of new fans for New Wave.
I think every show going forward has really caught a lot of, or will catch a lot of eyes for fans. New Wave's going to be doing some really good things, and I'm just really excited to be a part of it.
And so what I'm curious because obviously I spoke to Earl, a few months ago, and why do you think New Wave is now getting attention versus saying, 6 months ago? And I'm super curious because obviously I'm a fan, and my thought is that people are now starting to pay attention to other promotions because certain promotions haven't come back yet. They're not running the same way, and I'm curious why you think that New Wave is now getting attention. Because obviously you're on the inside, I'm on the outside looking in, and you're looking out. So I'm curious on that.
I think New Wave has had a gradual rise for well over a year now, maybe even 2 years at this point. And like with each show, they just keep getting better and better and better, and that's a pattern. So it's patterns. It's gonna keep getting better and better.
And obviously consistency matters tremendously. I think when each show, it's just in my world, consistency matters. So obviously there's a few more matches that I do want to talk about the New Wave. Obviously you and Jack Kennedy have had history. I think it's Jock Kennedy or Jack Kennedy.
Jack Kennedy.
So what has that been like? That's a lot of history between the two of you. At this way, I think you've had single matches. I think you've had three-way matches. And so, what is this like? Really getting to know an opponent and having a lot of matches between the two of you and really pushing, exchanging wins, and getting the better of each other and all that stuff. It's super interesting how these matches have evolved.
Jacques Kennedy and I trained together. Them and I are best friends. We've had a lot of history, had a lot of matches. We have a huge feud in Anafight Underground, and every time I get to kick Jacques in the face, and every time Jacques gets to punch me in the face, it's always going to be a good time for both of us and the people watching.
And so if you even further into that, what is that like to wrestle your best friend and really get those matches and get that, the ability, because the saying is, Triple H has said about Shawn Michaels is that you get to hit your friends the hardest. And so I don't know if that's the same with you and Jack Kennedy, that you hit each other the hardest and you can push each other the hardest.
I'm not really able to hear you very well. It's really, really distorted.
I don't know, can you hear me now?
Kind of, still really distorted.
1 second. Cool, just give me 1 second. I don't know if you can hear me now. I don't know if it's better. If it's still choppy.
It's a tad bit better. It's still really distorted, really choppy.
Yeah, this is the nice thing about live, everybody, is that you never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely choppy still, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's gonna help it. I don't know what's going on here. It's definitely choppy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know what to do. It's so weird. It's so complicated. I'll be right back.
I can't.
Give me 1 second.
All right. Hope I'm not choppy.
I don't know if this is better. I don't know if this is better. I don't know if it's worse.
It's a little bit better.
I don't know if you could hear me or it's still choppy the same way. Up, down, thumbs up, down.
You're okay for now.
And so even to talk about this history with, obviously your best friend, what is that like? Because punching each other and kicking each other and be able to push each other, do you feel that given the fact that you train together and that you're best friends, that as Triple H said about Shawn Michaels, and I think Shawn Michaels said the same thing to Triple H, that you get to hit your friends the hardest. So do you feel that way with the two of you, or is it sort of a little bit different than that with wrestling?
I definitely feel like there is like, how do I put it? I guess it's like best friends fight the best, maybe. Um, yeah, I think that's the best way to put it.
And obviously, I don't think this feud is done between the two of you. Even though it's your best friends, I think there's so much left to do between the two of you. Obviously, I think this feud is going to be continuing for the next like 10 years between the two of you as you're going at it. And what is that like for you? Because it seems that it's far from over in a lot of ways. So, where do you think this feud's going? Because again, it's kind of like Gary Day and Alan Williams to some degree.
I don't really know where the feud will be going. I guess we all just gotta wait and see.
And then obviously, I do want to talk about a new wave and what's going on. I'm sure there's certain things you can, things are coming up for you in new wave. So I think that's a good place to start. So what's coming up with you in new wave? I know you got some stuff coming up in new wave.
Again, you're really distorted. I'm not understanding anything.
So I don't know if you can hear me better now.
I cannot.
Oh man, I don't know. It's like a storm outside, so it's probably me because I'm in the Northeast. So I don't know how this is doing, and I don't know if it's better, worse, or indifferent now, or it's getting better, or whatnot.
I don't know. Here. Let me see if me going to my house is better. Do I sound choppy?
You sound a little bit better.
A little bit better. wanted to do it outside, so you don't have to hear my cat.
You sound better now.
Here, let's see. Is it better now?
Yeah, I can hear you much better.
I still can't hear you.
Of course, it's always me. It's always me. It's being difficult for my computer, everybody. Give me one more second. We'll be right back. Give me like 2 seconds. Hopefully this will work. Hopefully this will work. And of course it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my computer today. I don't know what's going on with my computer, everybody. I'm apparently really choppy. It's a real problem. I don't know what's going on with this. Hold up.
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear me better or no. It's still choppy.
Yeah, it's still choppy.
There's something going on my end, I think. Just, yeah, there's something going on with my end. It's not working.
Okay.
Yeah, there's something going on. I thought I had a personal hotspot, my phone, which is really a problem. So, just give me 1 second, because that'll help solve a problem probably. So I think I'm having just like a Wi-Fi problem. Just give me 1 more second. Sorry.
I hear you good now. You're frozen.
I don't know if we're good now.
Okay.
Oh, it's working? Finally?
Yes. Yep.
Oh wow, I don't know what the fuck was up with that shit. I already have enough problems today, clearly, and now it's back. So as I was stating, obviously, what is next for you in New Wave with what's going on that you can talk about, because obviously that's what I think everybody wants to know.
Injuring Ace Perry.
And so what is that like to prep up for that? Because Ace Perry is a very interesting wrestler, and he's right
It's
now.
gonna be it's gonna be easy.
I'm glad we've established that Ace Perry is going to be easy. I'm very glad on that. I like the confidence of this.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
But what is that even like, even going further into this? Because you're getting to face some of the hottest wrestlers right now in the indie market. And really you're getting the opportunity to really face people who are sort of at their prime and really popular in the indie realm. And I know you sort of don't care because you just want to kick their ass to some degree and just get better and rank yourself up. But what is that like, that you're actually being brought real competition? And that you're being pushed, and that is this really cool thing. And that's something that I really like about New Wave Pro, is that every wrestler I feel is being pushed, and there's no like, I'm going to hold your hand.
Mm-hmm. To me, like personally, it's a really really cool feeling. And again, like I said earlier, things don't really hit me until way later, and like wrestling people that are a name that have been places I want to be hasn't really hit me yet. The fact that I wrestled Gary in February still hasn't really hit yet. I don't know why I'm like that, but one day I'll just wake up or just be sitting down on my couch with my cat, and it'll just be like, "Whoa, I did that."
See, I'm the exact opposite, where I interview a lot of people, and I interview people in the comic realm, and obviously I've gone that route. And whenever I get a big name, I'm like, oh my god, I just interviewed this person. And even before I interview them, I'm ecstatic. And like, I don't know in which that, like, I don't rest on my laurels or anything like that, where it's always the next interview has to be the next good one. But I don't know how like somebody is like that. Like, I've never been like that. I'm like, oh man, I got a big interview to slay, like, and I get super excited. I know exactly like how important it is. And so that's super interesting, that like it doesn't hit you, and then like it's gonna hit you in like 2 years, and you're like, oh my god, when I was 45 matches into my career, I wrestled Gary J. Like that's super interesting actually, because I'm the exact opposite.
I get excited. Like I was super excited for Gary, and I was super nervous for it. Uh, I think more just taking a calm approach to things just helps um, my anxiety with things, and it just helps just me as a person to just be laid back and like whatever happens happens. Um, yeah.
No, that is super interesting, and obviously, I mean, it's really cool, and so I'm actually super curious because you've done, Mid South, obviously you're a New Wave Pro, um, you've done, obviously Anna Underground Fight, and what was we doing over there. Obviously, 0-1 is always amazing. And so, where do you want to go next? Because obviously, the Midwest is a very, very hot wrestling bed. Obviously, I'm in Connecticut, so I'm in the Northeast wrestling area, and obviously, then you go up into Massachusetts, which is beyond, and chaotic, chaotic. Well, I think it's chaotic. I want to say, and a few other promotions out in New England. Blitzkrieg, and obviously, I think South is New South, and Action is down like sort of in like the Mid South region, sort of big. And so, where do you want to be next? Because there's so many places to go in wrestling. And so, where do you want to wrestle? I'm so curious.
I really just kind of want to wrestle everywhere. Everywhere you mentioned, I would love to wrestle for. I'd love to come over to Northeast and wrestle for Beyond. I would like to go down south and wrestle for Action. Just really anywhere that someone will take a chance on me or I'll get lucky with, I'll take it.
And even with wrestling, because obviously I'm in Connecticut, and my home promotion in a lot of ways is St. Louis Anarchy. And so I'm actually curious with about this because they're with New South. I think the last show they had fans, if I'm correct. There are a bunch of them they've had, but there's only been like 100 people for a bunch of them, and so there's a lot more people watching on the internet. And obviously, people's home promotions who are saying, "Hey, the promotion that I stop and that I rearrange my schedule for to watch it live is for me. It's St. Louis Anarchy. For me, it's Beyond." And I don't live anywhere near Beyond. I don't live anywhere near St. Louis. I came into Beyond when I was in Washington, D.C. I came into St. Louis Anarchy when I was in D.C. And so, what is that like for you? Because now you could be a Midwest wrestler, but you're getting watched and discovered and booked, you know, because people are watching on the internet and what's going on with you and everything in that realm. So what is that like? Because we've obviously entered a streaming era, and COVID has forced that tremendously. So I'm super curious how you view
St. Louis Anarchy is definitely a goal of mine to get on. I guess with stuff like I guess the
that.
question with
I'll rephrase it. Did you feel that because I'll say it, and this is just my opinion, and it might help to clarify because I'm curious what you think on it. Is that I think 3 years ago it was a lot harder to break out of your relative territory and your connected territory. So if you were in the Midwest, I think 3 or 4 years ago it was a lot harder to break out. But now I feel with the fact that we're streaming, there are territories in our promotions that are connected, but it's the idea that Beyond is watching what St. Louis Anarchy is doing, and they're watching what people are tweeting about, and they're watching what people are checking out. And now it's a lot easier for people to get booked outside of their territory. And I mean, we've seen it with a bunch of wrestlers who wrestle in the Midwest, and they're in New South like a day later, then they're up in the Northeast a day later, and then they're bouncing all around. I feel like that is a very new phenomenon that's becoming a lot more mainstream. And I'm curious how you feel if sort of COVID and this streaming era, because we were entering the streaming era before COVID, but I feel like COVID really pushed that and changed the game in a lot of ways. And so I'm curious how you feel about that and how that even affects you of the potential of even getting booked, because I think it's such a game changer at this point.
I feel like it's definitely easier now that places like IWTV exist, and it's definitely I think it's a lot cooler for the fans because there is people that will, like, for example, there's going to be people that are in Massachusetts that can't go to a show in Missouri, but they really want to watch it. Well, now with IWTV, they can. So I think it's really, really cool for the fans. Compared to 3 or 4 years ago, I don't think it would have been ridiculously hard to break out because the Midwest is, in my opinion, like the head of like professional wrestling. Like I can think of 5 to 10 people right off the bat that are top names that have come from the Midwest. Like Midwest has brought out a lot of really, really good professional
So
wrestlers.
why do you think the Midwest does that? Because I can name a bunch of people also. I mean, I can name arguably the top woman wrestler right now, both in wrestling ability and worth ability in WWE, came out of the Midwest.
Mm-hmm. I really don't know why. I think it's just kind of one of those things, or just a really couple of good training schools down there, or Chicago and St. Louis are really big, especially in wrestling. So that could also be it.
No, I just find it fascinating. And I've asked Gary this, I've asked Aaron Williams this, I've asked a lot of people this question, and I am just beyond curious because it seems to me that all these top people have come out of the Midwest or have gone through the Midwest or wrestled in the Midwest, and they're killing it and they're doing phenomenal. So it's super interesting in that regard. And then obviously, to talk about COVID because COVID has been weird for wrestling to say the least. And it's sort of, I would imagine that it was weird and not weird for you, because I mean you're relatively new, and so you were wrestling in front of fans. And then I don't know what exactly the Midwest was like, but I lived in DC for the first 18 months of COVID. And DC as a state was very different during COVID than anything else. And obviously, there were wrestling shows that got canceled with me. And so I'm curious, how did COVID affect you as a wrestler? And I don't know if there was family shows or half capacity shows and safety issues and all that stuff. And I know New Wave Pro was operating very safely in a lot of ways. So what was that all like, really adjusting to have fans, 100 fans, no fans, and all that stuff?
I think wrestlers need to have the mentality to wrestle the same no matter the crowd. That's what I do. COVID definitely hurt everybody. It made everyone lose bookings. It made everyone lose jobs. It hurt wrestling just like it hurt the world. But I think we're in a lot better spot now in the world where more people are getting vaccinated. It has we have a stronger grip on it now than we did in March. So I think wrestling wise, things have been just fine. Every show I went to has went extremely safe. And me and other people I know have been healthy and safe. So, yeah.
And I'm curious, how do you think this is going to change wrestling? Because we saw a cinematic rise with a bunch of companies and a bunch of people doing cool stuff. Obviously, I'm a big Killing McMurphy fan, and he's done a bunch of cinematic stuff on YouTube just to mix things up. And WWE and AEW has done that, and I would also imagine it changes the way things are booked and if things are pre-taped. I know that, with Limitless, they did an entire season of Limitless in 2.5 days. And so it changes the way we think, where things can get done, how things get done. And so how do you feel that it has changed wrestling and even changed your approach and New Wave's approach to doing business? Because obviously certain things have had to change, I think, in wrestling. I don't think they're going to go back to the old way. Some things will, but I think certain things won't. And I'm curious your opinion. And I could be wrong about that. Like, I'm the first person because again, I'm a fan looking in with very limited knowledge, and I'm sort of a mark, if you will.
I feel like with me, I don't really think about the future very much. I think wrestling was always going to change. I think wrestling will always adapt to newer, better things. I think cinematic matches are cool. I really wasn't involved with a lot of like, okay, let's film a bunch of matches in 1 or 2 days, except for New Wave. New Wave did that one time, but yeah, like I think wrestling will always change no matter the circumstance.
Yeah, no, I was just curious because obviously, when speaking to people like Beyond and Limitless, and everybody does things sort of differently, and it's a very interesting, world that we've lived in. And so obviously, that's something that I just thought was super, super fascinating with that and just the way it was done. And also one of the cool things about New Wave is that in a lot of ways they were running with fans, and wrestling is extremely therapeutic to people. There are people who are dealing with a lot of shit and a lot of fucked up shit, and every weekend or every month they know they're going to a wrestling show, and for 2-3 hours, they could escape. And so, especially during COVID, I mean, some of those shows that you were a part of were probably more therapeutic than people realize. So, what was that like? Do a bunch of those shows that weren't there, and then to see people's faces and see because obviously it must have been very rewarding to some degree, knowing that you're back in front of fans and you're making them smile to some degree, and you're also taking away their stress.
Yeah, it is really rewarding to be able to wrestle in front of fans. Yeah, just how you put it's how I put it.
And so obviously, I find all this so interesting in so many ways. So I don't know if I want to talk about wrestling anymore, but I do want to talk about Star Wars.
I actually hate Star Wars.
Then we won't talk about Star Wars. We'll talk about Star Trek 'cause it's National Star Trek Day apparently.
I don't really see like I got Anakin from Anakin Skywalker, but wrestling has made me hate Star Wars. And last time I watched Star Wars was right whenever The Force Awakens came out, and I have not watched anything Star Wars since. And I've never watched Star Trek in my entire life.
I figured I would ask because you have a name like Anakin Murphy
Anakin Murphy is just a cool grungy name that I put together, and it sounds grungy and it sounds cool, so I'm gonna keep with it.
yeah, I love it, and I figured we have to talk with a name like Anakin. You know, you got to talk about Star Wars because it's just the only thing that is
Yeah,
it works. And the idea though is that I do think it is a cool name. It's also really catchy,
yeah.
and then I figured I would ask, but I couldn't just say why Anakin. I had to ask it in a clever way, and
I got Anakin from Skywalker, and I didn't really get Murphy from anything. I was just kind of brainstorming names, and I just thought Anakin Murphy sound cool, so I just put them together. Because I used to do backyard wrestling a lot, and that's where I got the name Anakin Murphy. And whenever I went pro, I just kind of stuck with the name.
So I'm actually super curious about backyard wrestling. Now that you brought that up, backyard wrestling is a whole entity in of itself, and it's good and bad. And so, what was that like? Because obviously, there's all sorts of different definitions. So what definition are you using when you say you started in backyard wrestling?
Definition I use, I did backyard wrestling with my probably the bestest friends in the world every single week and just put it up on YouTube. And it was probably the most fun I've had in my middle school and high school years, just getting off of school, walking to my house with all my friends, and we put on dumb backyard wrestling things. Uh, to me, it's just fun. Uh, I had a lot of fun with backyard wrestling.
I'm actually super curious. And this is so out of order, but that's how we roll sometimes. Given this entire interview, it's everything's live, and live is fun. And I love live stuff. So, what was that like coming in from backyard wrestling, sort of doing some ref stuff, getting real wrestling training, and then getting into the pros? Because that's something that is some people come in backyard style, but even taking what we learned in backyard and also having a referee vantage point and then actually having real wrestling training involved probably gives you a very unique perspective into how matches should be done and how matches can be built and what can be done in a match and what can be done in a story because obviously, when you're backyard wrestling, you're telling a cooler story in a lot of ways.
In backyard wrestling, me and my friends just did indie-rific stuff, and it was just fun. We didn't really care about like structure, and pro wrestling's a lot different. But with backyard wrestling, it was just fun, and it was just us having fun.
No, I mean, I'm not a big, backyard wrestling fan. I much prefer death match, and I much prefer, but also I haven't seen much of backyard wrestling. And the stuff that I've seen, it's not, some of it just is cringy, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah,
So I'm not a big fan of that. I'm much more a fan of deathmatch wrestling, and that's sort of where I'm at, and a lot of those stuff. And then obviously I love what's being done in New Wave Pro because I just think New Wave Pro is killing. New Wave Pro is very similar to me what St. Louis Anarchy did back in like 2018.
I like death matches a lot.
Yeah, well, some people view pain as therapy.
I mean, like I went to a deathmatch tournament a couple weeks ago and just helped out. And deathmatch wrestling has a huge following, and it's really cool to see. And I do have a lot of friends that do death matches, so I do like death matches.
So I'm gonna ask a question. So, do you want to do deathmatch wrestling, or is it something that you as a wrestler say, hey, I'm a fan of this and I appreciate what it's doing, but I'm more interested in, having, a hardcore street fight once in a while, but I don't want to be, an ICW no holds bar every weekend because what they do is crazy.
Um, I'm open to death matches, but I'm gonna be really selective with like the details of it. I do have like a list of deathmatch people I want to face in a deathmatch, but doing it every weekend is not going to be my thing.
Because it's also the idea that longevity in this business, also, and I'm gonna go through a bunch of stuff. It's the idea that you can only take so many chair shots to the head before you start having some serious problems, and also the more death matches you do, the more unsafe you can get, and where you can have real injuries that last you a long time and be permanent in a lot of ways. I mean, look at Matt Fremont, and nothing against Matt, but he's not that old of a guy, and he's taken a lot of beats in a lot of ways, and deathmatch wrestling takes its toll on people, I think.
Yeah, I respect deathmatch wrestling. I respect pretty much every deathmatch wrestler, um, just for that, just because they put themselves through a lot of pain um, for others and their own enjoyment. And I don't like people that shit on deathmatch wrestling
Well,
because
I'm not meaning to shit on it.
yeah, I
I
know.
love it, but it's the idea that I'm also a realist, and I think people need to understand what you're getting into and the sacrifice. Because I think a lot of wrestling fans don't understand that. And I spoke to Akira, and it's a really good example where he had to go to the hospital. I mean, that thing scared his girlfriend
Hmm.
because he lost a bunch of blood, and that was a nasty gash with a light tube that was not a little stitcher. I mean, that thing was a pretty serious injury, and it can be very, very scary. And I think during that match, I mean, it wasn't like anybody did anything malicious, but there you can die in a death match, no question about it.
Yeah,
So I mean, I just think that, from a respect position, a lot of people don't understand. And me and Akira spoke about it. And he was like, oh, yeah, and they showed it live on my Facebook thing. I'm like, it's a great clip. But it's a nasty looking gash when he showed it because he showed it to me like a week later. I'm like, I didn't ask him to show me, but I have mad respect for it. But like, I'm just saying people have to know what they're doing in wrestling, and deathmatch wrestling is a very scary thing.
hmm
So that's how I feel. But obviously we've been talking for a while now, and obviously we covered a lot of stuff. You're killing it in a new wave. I can't wait for you to go back to IW Mid South, which I like that promotion a lot, despite certain things that happen sometimes in those promotions. Anna Underground Fight is a crazy place to wrestle. Apparently, I mean that's just a wild, brand new promotion, and I'm
hmm
super stoked to see what they pull out for you and everybody else who's involved. Um, and then obviously 0-1, you got some stuff going on with that. So, and I know I missed a bunch of your stuff. So where else are you wrestling? I know something was announced today that you're wrestling at. I think is it a sixer?
Yeah, it's a Bittersweet Pro. That's going to be in October. Um, I think mainly it's just those few promotions I have coming up for right now. But most of my all my matches, all the shows I'm on, I advertise. So go into my profile and like scrolling through, you can see what kind of shows
So
that will be
so
at.
where can people find you on social media, on Twitter? Obviously, if you have a Facebook page, Instagram is very important. Um, I don't know if you have a Pro Wrestling Tees, Big Cartel, Brainstorm, I think it is, or Brain C. I forget the other one that's out there. I know it's
I have Facebook at Anakin Murphy, Instagram at Twitter at Anakin Sad Murphy, and Pro Wrestling Tees at Anakin Sad Murphy.
And so obviously what I've been saying to everybody is that you got to support indie wrestlers. And the way you do that is you buy their merch. So first and foremost, buying t-shirts for wrestlers actually makes a huge difference. And it's a subsidizing of income. Whether you're buying it at a wrestling event, and I get it, it's COVID. Maybe you don't want to go say hi to a wrestler if you go to the show because you're a little concerned. Um, but obviously, buying off pro wrestling tees is a big one. Buying off all the other things are big too. Following people on Twitter, liking their Facebook page, checking out what that stuff is extremely important. Um, and then furthermore, obviously going to see them at wrestling events, going to shows they're on, that's a big one. And when they're wrestling, and if it's being streamed live on IWTV, that's extremely important as well to watch it. Or if it gets up like New Wave does, gets up a few days later, and eventually I'm hoping New Wave gets into the streaming game. Watching it and just even tweeting out that a match was good and sharing that the match was good and sharing these announcements makes a big difference because all these algorithms are tricky, and the more people that share it, the more it affects the algorithm and the more it pushes it forth. So obviously doing that is super, super important. So that's something that I really encourage everybody to do. Also, I'm an indie content creator. Obviously, my sponsor is really, really helpful, but they don't cover everything. I have Buy Me a Coffee. It's $5, guys. In increments of 5. It's also the idea that if you want a permanent guest spot on my show, that's up there. It's $10, and if you want a live read advertisement, it's 15. Because we are fan supported, even though I do have a sponsor. Every little dollar helps, but obviously, before you go buy me a coffee, you should go buy an Anakin Murphy T-shirt because there's no hope for any of us.
Hell yeah.
And so, obviously, having said all that, that's all I have to say. But I'm going to give you the final word because we're screwed.
Hell yeah. That's tight.
I think that's perfect. I think that's perfect, and so that's a wrap.
Hell yeah.